It's Tuesday, May 13th. Talks are heating up, but is Israel being frozen out? We start here. The U.S. makes a deal with Hamas for a hostage without the help of its ally.
The Trump administration bypassed Israel.
This all colors a consequential Middle East trip for President Trump. We'll break it down. The White House backs off a full-fledged trade war.
We achieved a total reset with China.
Stocks are surging, but some tariffs still remain on China. So what does this mean for prices? And new arrivals flip the immigration debate upside down.
The program no longer aligns with where we are as a church and what we're about.
Why some of the only refugees now being admitted to this country are white South Africans. From ABC News, this is Start Here. I'm Brad Milkey. Eight years ago, the newly inaugurated President Trump took his first foreign trip as president. He made history by not using that opportunity to first visit our traditional allies in North America or Europe. Instead, his first trip was to Saudi Arabia.
My first stop will be Saudi Arabia, the heart of the Muslim world. There I will address a historic gathering of the leaders of more than 50 Muslim nations.
Well, yesterday, he once again boarded Air Force One for the first foreign trip of his new term. And once again, he's going to the Middle East.
So now I'm about to depart on a historic visit. Some of you are going with us to, as I said, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and United Arab Emirates.
It's a very consequential moment there, of course. After a brief ceasefire, Israel has announced its plans to re-invade Gaza. Iran is progressing toward a nuclear weapon, and Iranian-backed terror groups continue to attack Israel. And right after Trump got on that plane, Israel actually announced that Hamas has released the last living American hostage from Gaza. And yet, of all the countries Trump is visiting, Israel isn't one of them. This is not your typical diplomatic mission. This is not your typical day in the region. So let's start it off with ABC's Jordana Miller, who's based in Jerusalem. Jordana, let's start with this hostage handover. So this is Idan Alexander. Can you walk me through his release?
It really is extraordinary. Idan Alexander becomes the last living American hostage to be freed by Hamas. He was born in Tenafly, New Jersey. Decided to sign up for the IDF, for the Israeli army, after high school. His parents are Israelis. And unfortunately, not long into his service in a combat unit, he was kidnapped by Hamas on October 7th from his military post. And he's been one of the most visible, if you will, hostages because of his American identity. He was in several Hamas hostage videos. The last one just in April, where he pleaded for President Trump to work for his release. And he looked anxious and thin and downtrodden.
I'm an American, Israeli citizen, currently being held captive in the Gaza Strip.
And the United States and Hamas have negotiated a deal that has freed him. And in a really extraordinary way, we did not this time see a big ceremony and pomp and what many people call propaganda, right? Idan did not have to wave to crowds or pretend he liked his captors or kiss one of them on their head. This time, he was really in a low-key way with no cameras and no ceremonies. Hamas handed him over to the Red Cross. The Red Cross delivered him to the Israeli army. He had first medical checks, and then he was brought into Israel to the Re'im base, the same base where almost all of the hostages have gone through. His parents, fresh off flights from the United States, were there. Very emotional reunions. His mother hugging him, crying, saying, "We love you so much. We were so worried about you. You're home now. You're safe. You're protected. We're here." Then they were airlifted to the Ichalov hospital, where he will spend the next couple days undergoing, various tests and checks. But the initial assessment is that he's doing okay, right? He's not emaciated. He's walking around. He's talking. So, the hospital director said, at this stage he's doing fine, though she did caution it's day one, right? And they have a lot of experience with hostages and all the PTSD that comes later. So she said, we'll wait and see. But right now he's doing okay.
And then, in the helicopter en route, he actually wrote out a handwritten message on a whiteboard, basically thanking President Trump for all this. What was interesting, Jordana, you mentioned this was directly negotiated between Hamas and the Americans. So it doesn't sound like Israel accepted him, but it didn't sound like they were involved in the negotiations. Why is that, and why is it so significant?
It is pretty extraordinary. I mean, the Trump administration bypassed Israel and spoke directly to Hamas and negotiated Idan Alexander's release.
They thought he was dead just a short while ago. His parents are so happy. They're so happy.
It tells us, Brad, that first of all, there's daylight and tensions between President Trump and the Israeli prime minister. Because if President Trump was so convinced that Netanyahu would ultimately choose a ceasefire and ending the war over an expanded military operation conquering Gaza, then why would Trump need to negotiate a separate deal? Obviously, there was concern that Netanyahu is very serious in not only word but in deed about this massive operation to conquer all of the Gaza Strip, which he just announced last week.
We
decided on a forceful operation in Gaza.
I think the president decided that he was going to get out the one living American before any massive operation, and at the same time put pressure on the Israeli prime minister, on Hamas, to say, hey, we just got a hostage out, and now let's talk about a ceasefire. So to Netanyahu, put your war plans on the shelf. To Hamas, show some flexibility. And now I want both of you to work on a ceasefire deal. And to be honest, he's been effective, Brad, because we heard the prime minister announce for the first time in many, many weeks that he's sending a high-level delegation, Israeli negotiating team, to Doha, to Qatar. And they will be there, we're told, for days, working on a possible new ceasefire deal.
Oh, wow.
Right? Will it be partial? Will it be full? We're not clear yet. But the fact that President Trump has gotten Netanyahu back to the negotiating table is really also another win.
By being willing to tell the world, hey, we're not 100% on board with Israel. Not all the time. There are lines for us, and we might not side with them. That gets you a type of street credit and maybe even more power, perhaps, with Israel. All that brings us then, Jordana, to this big foreign trip for Trump. He's going to all these Middle Eastern countries and not Israel. What is the purpose, I guess, of this trip and what's expected to happen?
Well, we hear from Israeli officials that the reason President Trump's not coming to Israel is because, there's no real breakthrough or ceasefire in sight. Maybe that'll change by the end of the week, right? I mean, anything seems possible at times when you think about Trump and the way he does things. But that was the main reason. Trump was going to come here if there was something to come and celebrate. He's going to Saudi Arabia, to Qatar, to the United Arab Emirates. And clearly one of the main issues, or the top of the agenda really, is likely the talks that President Trump is conducting with Iran directly to curb their nuclear program, trying to hammer out a new nuclear deal.
Love to see a peace deal, a strong peace deal. They cannot have a nuclear weapon, but I would say that this is the single most important period in the history of Iran, which is a long history.
The Saudis, the Qataris, the Emiratis, and frankly, the Israelis, the Egyptians, the Jordanians, all of them are united in their desire to curb Iran's power in the region, their support of terror, and of course their nuclear ambitions. So I think that's going to play a major role. But the president will also be talking with Saudi Arabia about a defense pact and about military sales to Saudi Arabia and a normalization deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia.
Like a diplomatic normalization where like they recognize each other in a diplomatic way.
That's right. They have no diplomatic ties. Saudi Arabia is considered the big get, the country that would change the equation for Israel in the Middle East if it were to sign a normalization deal with Saudi Arabia, one between Saudi Arabia and Israel. And, it all comes back to the same point. I think here in Jerusalem, there is fear growing that if President Trump can sign a deal with the Houthis and not include Israel, sign a deal to get out an American hostage in Gaza without talking to Israel, could they also move forward on strengthening ties with the Saudis and not have any of that dependent on a normalization deal with Israel? Could Israel, be left behind? So this is a critical moment. Netanyahu has to think about what is really at stake here. If he decides to go on the war path, and we know that President Trump doesn't want another phase of the war in Gaza.
Right.
But if Netanyahu decides to do that, will he be missing an opportunity to be part of a normalization deal with Saudi Arabia, something that could really transform the region?
Really interesting how this one sort of hostage handover and the fact that the U.S. went directly to Hamas and said, forget the Israelis, we'd like to get this person out, how much that can tell you about what's happening this week in the Middle East. All right, Jordana Miller, there in Jerusalem. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brad.
Next up on Start Here, we were told we'd have to tough out these tariffs on China. Well, that lasted about a month. The White House hits the pause button after the break. This show is supported by Quince. You know when you order a new shirt online and it ends up being even more comfortable than you were hoping for? I love that feeling. And that's the kind of feeling you can expect with Quince. We actually have Quince shirts in our house right now that are like our nice, relaxing wear. Quince has stylish, well-made clothes you will actually want to wear, like organic cotton silk polos, European linen beach shorts, comfortable pants that work for everything from nice dinners to casual backyard barbecues. Plus, everything with Quince is priced 50 to 80% less than what you'd find at similar brands. By working directly with top artisans and cutting out the middlemen, Quince gives you luxury pieces without the markups. And Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes. Elevate your closet with Quince. Go to quince.com/start for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/start to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/start. This show is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. When you need to hire someone, you need them now. And every hour you spend on the tedious logistics of scheduling interviews is another hour without the perfect person in the role. Luckily, ZipRecruiter makes hiring as fast and easy as speed dating. With Zip Intro from ZipRecruiter, you can post your job today and start talking to qualified candidates tomorrow. Right now, you can try Zip Intro for free at ziprecruiter.com/starthere. All you need to do is post your job and plug in your availability for interviews. I wish I could do that for my interviews. Zip Intro will automatically help identify qualified candidates for you. Then you can choose who you want to talk to, and Zip Intro will set up back-to-back video calls for as soon as the next day. Enjoy the benefits of speed hiring with new Zip Intro, only from ZipRecruiter, rated #1 hiring site based on G2. Try Zip Intro for free at ziprecruiter.com/starthere. Again, that's ziprecruiter.com/starthere. Zip Intro. Post jobs today. Talk to qualified candidates tomorrow. You remember when President Trump called for huge tariffs on almost every country on Earth and then abruptly halted that plan? He instituted a 90-day pause. Stocks, which had plummeted, jumped up a bit. Businesses generally don't like tariffs, but they didn't go back up to normal, in large part because while the U.S. was pausing a bunch of taxes on a lot of countries, they were still moving forward with one huge tax on one country, China. China then retaliated to our tariffs. We raised our tariffs again. Fast forward a few weeks, and companies are paying 145% markups for vast quantities of stuff that we import from the Chinese. Well, yesterday morning, these countries announced they have de-escalated this trade war for now. ABC senior White House correspondent Selena Wang is with us from the West Wing. Selena, what's in this deal?
Well, look, the White House and the president are touting this as a trade deal, but what it really is a pause. So for 90 days, the U.S. is lowering its tariffs on China from 145% to 30%. China is lowering its tariffs on U.S. goods from 125% to 10%. And both sides have agreed to continue discussions on trade and economic issues.
We achieved a total reset with China after productive talks in Geneva.
That 145% tariff was essentially a trade embargo that was just halting trade between the world's two biggest economies. But in making the announcement about this tariff pause, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said neither country wants to decouple.
We do want trade. We want more balanced trade. And I think that both sides are committed to achieving that.
And make no mistake, both the U.S. and China were feeling the economic pain from these tariffs. In China, they were dealing with a manufacturing slump. Here in the U.S., sources told us that major retail executives were warning the president that these tariffs could lead to empty store shelves in the U.S.
I think it's going to be fantastic for China. I think it's going to be fantastic for us. And I think it's going to be great for unification and peace.
So, I mean, this is a big deal, but it is just a pause, and it does mark a very dramatic climb down and retreat from both the U.S. and China. So, look, you're seeing tons of relief across the markets and businesses.
The temporary reduction, which we hope will be permanent, was great news, actually. I mean, at 145% tariff, we were basically frozen. It was an embargo. We weren't shipping anything. At 30%, now goods can begin to flow.
But we still don't have clarity about what happens in the long run because, again, this is just a 90-day pause.
Yeah, and so, I mean, stocks skyrocketed, right? They're still down on the year, but they are back up past where they were before, quote-unquote, Liberation Day. How does this affect prices, though, right? That's got to be the big concern for most Americans. Is stuff going to keep costing more?
Yeah, well, so we actually do have new figures from the Yale Budget Lab. They are estimating that given this new lower rate on goods from China and a recent framework deal with the United Kingdom, they estimate now that tariffs will cost the average household $2,800 per year. That is lower than their previous estimate of $4,900. But I mean, a few $1,000s more per year is that's still a lot. People are going to feel that pinch. I mean, a 30% tariff on goods from China is not insignificant. And I've been talking to some small businesses, one toy store in specific in the Virginia area, not too far from where we are in D.C. And she was saying that she's still dealing with higher prices from suppliers. She's still uncertain about what's going to come down the pipeline. And she's just trying to stockpile as much as she can with goods that haven't jumped in price yet.
That does seem like the thing, right? The uncertainty. Because if you're a business and you're like, okay, I don't know if we're going to lower price. Like, we don't want to keep changing our prices week to week. So maybe we'll keep them where they are. I guess, what happens next in these negotiations then, Selena? Because, like, again, if we're thinking in war terms, this is less of a tariff truce than like a tariff ceasefire for now kind of a thing. But, I mean, does this signal that the U.S. is getting a little rattled by these prices sort of remaining so high? They haven't gotten their deal yet.
Yeah, I think a ceasefire is a good way to describe it. So, I mean, we don't know what kind of concessions President Trump is going to be able to get from China. I mean, some experts are telling me that this is a win for Beijing because they got Trump to lower tariffs without any concrete commitments, except for the commitment to keep on talking. From the U.S. side, you know, President Trump has talked about wanting to not have this massive trade deficit with China. So can he get China to make purchasing agreements? He's used fentanyl as another reason for tariffs on China. What commitments can he get from China to stop the flow of precursor chemicals that are needed to make fentanyl out of China and eventually making its way into the United States? There are other questions about, will China agree to reduce some of its non-tariff trade barriers, some of their barriers as well for American companies to do business in that country?
The biggest thing that we're discussing is the opening up China, and they've agreed to do that. But it's going to take a while to paper it. You know, that's not the easiest thing to paper.
There's a lot of question marks here, Brad, about how much pressure China is going to feel to capitulate and appease President Trump.
If a longer-term deal is not reached with China at the end of these 90 days, can the American people expect those tariffs to go back up to 145%?
No, but they would go up substantially higher. You know, at 145, you're really decoupling because nobody's going to buy.
But Trump did say that if they don't reach a full deal by the end of these 90 days, he said tariffs wouldn't go back to 145%, but he did say they would substantially increase. So it appears that this sort of volatility is still here to stay.
Right, unless they reach a deal during this pause. But that's what's been so difficult to suss out here is, like, what kind of deals will satisfy Trump? Or if there's no deal, how much economic turmoil is his White House able to stomach before pausing again or eliminating these tariffs? Selena Wang there in the White House right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad.
Okay, one more quick break. When we come back, refugees can come in lots of forms, but many people were surprised that these folks qualified. One Last Thing is next.
Hello, it's Robin Roberts here.
Hey guys, it's George Stephanopoulos here.
Hey everybody, it's Michael Strahan here. Wake up with Good Morning America.
Robin, George, Michael, GMA, America's favorite #1 morning show. The morning's first breaking news, exclusive interviews, what everyone will be talking about that day. Put some good in your morning and start your day with GMA.
Good Morning America.
Put the good in your morning. GMA 7A on ABC.
Welcome to the United States of America.
And one last thing. If you were at Dulles International Airport yesterday in Washington, you might have seen a remarkable sight. Refugees arriving for the first time in the U.S.
Many of us, our families, have had a journey not that different from the journey that you are embarking on today.
They were greeted by State Department officials. They got little American flags to wave, the whole 9 yards. What you might not have known if you were watching them is that these refugees have ignited controversy on multiple continents.
The Trump administration has accused South Africa's government of racially discriminating against them.
These emigres are from South Africa. Specifically, they're Afrikaners who descended from Dutch colonists who settled in Africa in the 1600s.
59 refugees landed from South Africa, all of them Afrikaners, all of them white.
That's ABC's Shannon Kingston, who covers the State Department. And if you're wondering how white Africans ended up as refugees in America, she's here to help.
To understand this, we have to go all the way back to the apartheid era.
It's the government's fear of what they've called the black menace that dominates their policies.
South Africa is the only place in Africa which will be able to remain in the hands of the white man.
So, little history. Up until 1990, South Africa was ruled by a white minority that used power and violence to keep the country apart. Apartheid, segregated by race.
South Africa is a country of many races. There is room for all the various races in this country.
Nelson Mandela was sent to prison for protesting, but eventually enough pressure was put on the government to end the policy. In South Africa's first free and fair election, Mandela was elected president. And while whites were afraid of retribution, he was promoting peaceful reconciliation.
I greet you all in the name of peace.
But while black South Africans got the vote, many white South African families kept their money, their power, and crucially, their land. A government audit in 2017 found that white people made up just 9% of the country's population, but still owned more than 70% of its farmland.
Part of apartheid's legacy is the South African government's efforts to kind of bring about some land reform to give people who have been historically disenfranchised access to the country's resources, as well as violent farm attacks on white and black landowners.
These attacks on farms have been relatively isolated, but they are unsettling. Imagine being a farmer, a bunch of people show up in the middle of the night and say, "Your people took this long ago, it now belongs to us," and they demand you leave to avoid a beating. Here in the U.S., these stories have galvanized right-wing media outlets.
They happen to be white, but whether they're white or black makes no difference to me, but white farmers are being brutally killed and their land is being confiscated in South Africa.
There is no persecution of white African or South Africans in South Africa.
The South African government is saying there is no evidence of persecution, but the State Department has pushed back on it. They say that's exactly what a government who is persecuting a population would say, but it doesn't overcome the fact that there's just really not a whole lot of evidence that any kind of mistreatment is happening on a widespread scale.
Recently, Shannon says, the Trump administration decided to get involved.
What appears to have caught President Trump's attention is a controversial law that went into effect in South Africa this year. It enables the government to seize land without offering any compensation, although the South African government says absolutely zero land has been seized under it so far.
Cut to yesterday, with dozens of Afrikaners arriving with their luggage, which to most Americans might not be a big deal either way, right? It's a few dozen people. Who cares? But that's just it. 59 refugees from South Africa is 59 more than we've admitted from a lot of other countries recently.
The reason this is so controversial is it's all going down at a time where other refugee admissions have basically fallen to zero.
This is why critics say it's a concerning development. After all, you can say refugees should all be treated the same, but we do prioritize certain groups all the time. We prioritized Cubans fleeing Castro. Then we prioritized Afghans fleeing the Taliban. Now, white Africans fleeing black Africans have effectively jumped to the front of the line. This has even angered groups who are traditionally willing to take in anybody and everybody.
The program no longer aligns with where we are as a church and what we're about.
Last night, the presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church, which often helps to resettle refugees, told ABC News Live they are ending their relationship with the federal government over this.
This particular situation of admitting Afrikaners as refugees that really meet no definition of a refugee.
The Trump administration says that this is just the beginning. This is just the first wave. They're still taking applications in South Africa. They're vetting people, and they're anticipating resettling more people down the line.
The U.S. has a long history of taking in the poor and destitute. These South Africans, like any other refugees, will be sheltered by nonprofits as they make their new lives here. But as they get settled, their new neighbors will be arguing over exactly what kinds of refugees should be welcomed here. I've traveled around South Africa, by the way, some of the most breathtaking landscapes and farmland on Earth. Also, I'm impressed with people who are bilingual. South Africa has 11 official languages. How do you guys do it? More on all these stories on ABC News Live, including daily coverage of the Diddy trial. We've actually got a new special program on Live called Burden of Proof, the case against Diddy. It airs multiple times a day, starting at 5:30 Eastern, so you can get all the latest details. I'm Brad Milkey. I'll see you tomorrow.
Hello, it's Robin Roberts here.
Hey guys, it's George Stephanopoulos here. Hey everybody, it's Michael Strahan here. Wake up with Good Morning America.
Robin, George, Michael, GMA, America's favorite #1 morning show. The morning's first breaking news, exclusive interviews, what everyone will be talking about that day. Put some good in your morning and start your day with GMA.
Good Morning America.
Put the good in your morning. GMA 7A on ABC.